My name is Alexander Blackwood, and for 43 years, I believed that money could buy everything that mattered in life. As the CEO of Blackwood Industries, a multinational corporation worth over $3 billion, I had grown accustomed to a world where every problem had a price tag, every relationship was transactional, and every emotion was a weakness to be eliminated. The penthouse apartment where I lived on the Upper East Side of Manhattan was a testament to my success. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, original artwork worth millions, and furniture that cost more than most people's annual salaries. But despite all this luxury, my home felt more like a museum than a place where someone actually lived. It was cold, sterile, and perfectly organized, much like my heart had become after years of betrayals and disappointments. I had built my empire from nothing, starting with a small tech company in my garage 20 years ago. Through ruthless business decisions, strategic acquisitions, and an unwavering focus on profit, I had transformed that small startup into one of the most powerful corporations in the world. But success had come at a price. I had lost my ability to trust, to love, and to see the value in anything that couldn't be measured in dollars and cents. My personal life was as empty as my professional life was full. I had been married twice, both times to women who were more interested in my bank account than in me as a person. My first wife, Victoria, had cheated on me with my business partner and taken half my assets in the divorce. My second wife, Sophia, had been even worse. She had tried to poison me to inherit my fortune early. After that betrayal, I had sworn off relationships entirely, convinced that everyone who approached me was motivated by greed. The staff in my penthouse was minimal and carefully selected for their discretion and efficiency. I had a personal assistant, a chef who came 3 times a week, a driver, and a cleaning service that sent the same person every day, Maria Santos, a woman in her 50s who had been working for me for 3 years. Maria was different from the other people in my employ. While my assistant, chef, and driver all treated me with the obsequious deference that money typically bought, Maria treated me with a quiet dignity that I found both annoying and intriguing. She never asked for raises, never complained about working conditions, and never tried to engage me in unnecessary conversation. She simply did her job with a thoroughness and care that was rare in my experience. What I didn't know about Maria was that she had her own story of loss and resilience. She was a widow who had emigrated to the United States from El Salvador 15 years earlier, fleeing violence and seeking a better life for her daughter. Her husband had been killed in the Civil War, and she had raised her daughter Elena alone. While working multiple jobs to pay for her education, Elena had been Maria's pride and joy, a brilliant young woman who had earned a scholarship to study medicine at Columbia University. For years, Maria had worked tirelessly to support her daughter's dreams, taking on extra cleaning jobs, working weekends, and sacrificing her own comfort to ensure that Elena had everything she needed to succeed. But tragedy had struck the Santos family just 6 months before Maria began working for me. Elena had been killed in a car accident during her final year of medical school, just months before she would have graduated and begun her residency. The drunk driver who had taken Elena's life had walked away from the accident with minor injuries, while Maria's entire world had been destroyed in an instant. I knew none of this, of course. To me, Maria was simply the efficient, quiet woman who cleaned my apartment and stayed out of my way. I barely acknowledged her presence, treating her like a piece of furniture that happened to move around and dust things. The day that would change. Everything began like any other. It was December 23, 2023, and I was preparing for another solitary Christmas in my penthouse. I had no family to visit, no friends to celebrate with, and no desire to participate in what I considered the commercialized nonsense of the holiday season. My plan was to work through the holidays, as I did every year, using the quiet time when the markets were closed to review quarterly reports and plan for the next fiscal year. Maria arrived at her usual time, 8 a.m. sharp, carrying her cleaning supplies and wearing the same modest uniform she wore every day. I was in my home office, reviewing acquisition proposals, when I heard her moving quietly through the apartment, dusting, vacuuming, and organizing with her characteristic efficiency. Around noon, as I was taking a break from work to eat the lunch my chef had prepared the day before, Maria appeared in the doorway of the dining room. This was unusual. She typically avoided areas where I was present, working around my schedule to minimize any interaction. "Mr. Blackwood," she said in her soft, accented English, "I have something for you." I looked up from my meal, annoyed at the interruption. "What is it, Maria?" "I'm busy." She stepped forward, holding a small, wrapped package in her hands. The wrapping paper was clearly inexpensive, probably from a dollar store, and the bow was slightly crooked, as if it had been tied by hand rather than by a professional gift wrapper. "It's a Christmas gift," she said simply, placing the package on the table next to my plate. I stared at the gift in disbelief, then looked up at Maria, with a mixture of confusion and irritation. "A gift, Maria? I don't do Christmas gifts, and I certainly don't accept gifts from employees." "It's not expensive," she said quietly. "I just thought, it's Christmas." I picked up the package, feeling its light weight, and couldn't help but laugh. It was a harsh, cold laugh that echoed through the dining room. "Maria, do you have any idea how much money I spend on Christmas bonuses for my executives? Do you know what a real gift looks like in my world?" Maria's face remained impassive, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Hurt, perhaps, or disappointment. "This is sweet," I continued, my voice dripping with condescension, "but I don't need trinkets from the dollar store. If you want to give me something for Christmas, just continue doing your job well." I set the package aside without opening it and returned to my meal, dismissing her with a wave of my hand. "You can go back to work now." Maria stood there for a moment longer, and when I looked up again, I saw tears in her eyes. But she didn't say anything. She simply nodded, turned around, and walked back to her cleaning. For the rest of the day, I forgot about the incident entirely. The package sat on my dining room table, unopened and ignored, while I returned to my work. I had more important things to think about than a maid's misguided attempt at holiday cheer. That evening, as I was preparing for bed, I noticed that Maria had left earlier than usual. Typically, she worked until 6 p.m., but according to my security system, she had left at 4:30. I assumed she was taking time off for the holidays and thought nothing more of it. It wasn't until the next morning, Christmas Eve, that I began to understand what I had done. My assistant called to inform me that Maria had requested the day off, which was unusual since she typically worked through the holidays to earn extra money. When I asked why, my assistant mentioned that Maria had seemed upset when she made the request. For some reason I couldn't explain, I found myself thinking about Maria's gift throughout the day. It sat on my dining room table like an accusation, wrapped in its cheap paper and crooked bow. Every time I passed by, I felt a strange twinge of something I couldn't identify. Guilt, perhaps, or curiosity. By evening, my curiosity had grown stronger than my pride. I picked up the package and examined it more closely. It was light, about the size of a paperback book, and something rattled softly inside when I shook it gently. Finally, despite myself, I carefully unwrapped the gift. Inside was a small, handmade photo frame, clearly crafted from scraps of wood and painted by hand. The paint job was amateur but careful, with small flowers painted around the border in bright, cheerful colors. Inside the frame was a photograph that made my breath catch in my throat. It was a picture of a young woman in a graduation cap and gown, smiling radiantly at the camera. She had Maria's eyes and smile, but she was young and full of life and hope. At the bottom of the frame, in Maria's careful handwriting, were the words, "Elena Santos, MD, my daughter, my pride, my heart." But there was more. Tucked behind the photograph was a small, folded piece of paper. With trembling hands, I unfolded it and read Maria's message. "Mr. Blackwood, this is my daughter Elena. She died 6 months ago, just before she would have become a doctor. She always said that the most important thing in life was to help people, even when they don't think they need help. You seem very sad and alone, even though you have everything. I thought maybe you would like to know that someone cares about you, even if you don't care about them. Merry Christmas." Maria, I stared at the photograph and the note for a long time, feeling something crack open inside my chest. This wasn't a cheap trinket from a dollar store. This was the most precious thing Maria owned, a memory of her dead daughter, and she had given it to me. A man who had treated her with indifference and cruelty for 3 years. For the first time in decades, I felt tears in my eyes. Not tears of anger or frustration, but tears of shame and recognition. Maria had seen something in me that I had forgotten existed, my humanity, and she had tried to reach it with the only gift that truly mattered, love and compassion. As I sat alone in my penthouse that Christmas Eve, holding the photograph of a young woman I had never met, but who had somehow changed my life. I realized that I had been living as a dead man for years. I had built walls around my heart, so high and so thick that I had forgotten what it felt like to be truly alive. But Maria's gift had found a crack in those walls, and through that crack, light was beginning to shine. Christmas Day arrived with a blanket of snow covering Manhattan, transforming the city into a winter wonderland that I observed from my penthouse windows with new eyes. For the first time in years, I wasn't working. Instead, I sat in my living room, holding Maria's gift and staring at Elena's photograph, trying to understand the profound shift that was occurring within me. The young woman in the picture had a radiant smile that reminded me of someone I used to be, long before cynicism and betrayal had hardened my heart. Elena Santos had been on the verge of becoming a doctor, dedicated to helping others, when her life was cut short, and her mother, despite her own devastating loss, had seen fit to reach out to a cold, indifferent man who had never shown her an ounce of kindness. I spent the entire day researching Elena Santos online, learning about the remarkable young woman whose memory Maria had entrusted to me. I found newspaper articles about her academic achievements, scholarship awards, and volunteer work at free clinics in underserved communities. I discovered that she had been planning to specialize in pediatric oncology, wanting to help children with cancer because she had watched her grandmother die from the disease when she was young. The more I learned about Elena, the more I understood the magnitude of Maria's loss. This wasn't just a mother who had lost a child. This was a woman who had lost her entire reason for living, her hope for the future, her legacy. And yet, somehow, she had found the strength to care about a stranger's loneliness. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my driver and asked him to take me somewhere. Not to a business meeting or a corporate event, but to the small apartment building in Queens where Maria lived. I had her address from her employment records, but I had never given any thought to her life outside of my penthouse. The building was modest but well maintained, in a neighborhood that was clearly working class, but safe and clean. As I stood outside in the falling snow, looking up at the lit windows and imagining the families inside celebrating Christmas together, I felt a profound sense of shame about my own isolation. I climbed the stairs to Maria's third-floor apartment and knocked on the door, my heart pounding with nervousness. When she opened the door and saw me standing there, her eyes widened in shock and confusion. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, clearly bewildered by my presence. "Is everything all right? Do you need something?" I stood there for a moment, looking at this woman who had worked for me for 3 years, realizing that I had never really seen her before. She was wearing a simple dress and an apron, and I could smell the aroma of traditional holiday cooking coming from her apartment. Despite her obvious surprise at seeing me, she maintained her characteristic dignity. "Maria," I said, my voice hoarse with emotion, "I came to apologize, and to thank you." She looked confused. "Apologize? For what?" "For being blind," I said, "for being cruel, for not seeing that you were trying to give me the most precious thing you had, and I threw it back in your face." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. She simply stepped aside and gestured for me to come. In her apartment was small but immaculate, decorated with photographs of Elena at every stage of her life. There were pictures of Elena as a baby, as a young girl in school uniforms, as a teenager at her high school graduation, and finally, as a young woman in her medical school graduation gown. The apartment was filled with the presence of a beloved daughter who was no longer there. "She was beautiful," I said, looking at the photographs. "And brilliant. I spent all day reading about her achievements. She was my everything," Maria said softly. "When she died, I thought my life was over. I thought there was no reason to keep going. But you did keep going," I said. "You kept working, kept living." How Maria was quiet for a long moment. Then, she said, "Elena always told me that love doesn't die when someone dies. She said that love keeps growing, and if we don't share it with others, it becomes poison inside us. So I tried to share it, even with people who don't want it." Her words hit me like a physical blow. "People like me. You're not a bad man, Mr. Blackwood," Maria said gently. "You're just hurt." Elena could always see the hurt in people, even when they tried to hide it. I sat down heavily in one of her modest chairs, feeling the weight of years of loneliness and bitterness pressing down on me. "Maria, I've spent so many years protecting myself from being hurt that I forgot how to feel anything at all. Your gift, Elena's picture, It broke something open inside me. "Good," she said simply. "Sometimes things need to be broken before they can heal properly." We talked for hours that Christmas evening. Maria told me about her journey from El Salvador, about the struggles of raising Alina alone, about the pride she felt watching her daughter succeed against all odds. She told me about the night Alina died, about the phone call from the hospital, about the drunk driver who had destroyed her world in an instant. In return, I found myself telling Maria things I had never told anyone. I told her about my childhood, about the father who had abandoned our family when I was 10, about the mother who had worked 3 jobs to keep us afloat. I told her about my first business failures, about the betrayals that had taught me not to trust, about the loneliness that had become my constant companion. "You know," Maria said as the evening grew late, "Alina used to say that the richest people are often the poorest, because they have everything except what matters most." "What matters most?" I asked. "Connection," she said. "Love, purpose, the feeling that your life makes a difference to someone else." When I finally left Maria's apartment that night, I felt like a different person. The gift she had given me wasn't just Elena's photograph. It was the reminder that I was still capable of feeling, still capable of caring, still capable of being human. Over the following weeks, I began to make changes in my life. I started by changing how I treated Maria. Instead of ignoring her presence, I began to greet her each morning, to ask about her day, to see her as a person rather than just an employee. I increased her salary significantly and offered her health insurance and paid vacation time. But more importantly, I began to understand that Maria's gift had awakened something in me that had been dormant for years, the desire to make a difference in the world beyond just accumulating wealth. I started researching charitable organizations, particularly those that helped immigrants and provided scholarships for underprivileged students pursuing medical careers. I discovered that there were hundreds of young people like Alina who had the passion, intelligence and dedication to become doctors, but lacked the financial resources to pursue their dreams. 1 month after Christmas, I called Maria into my office for a conversation that would change both of our lives. "Maria," I said, "I've been thinking about Alina, about what she would have accomplished if she had lived. I want to do something to honor her memory, but I need your help." Maria looked puzzled. "What kind of help?" "I want to establish a scholarship fund in Elena's name," I said, "a fund that will help young people from immigrant families pursue medical careers. I want to make sure that Elena's dream of helping people doesn't die with her." Maria's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. When she finally found her voice, she said, "Mr. Blackwood, that would mean everything to me." "But why?" "Because you taught me something I had forgotten," I said. "You taught me that the most valuable things in life can't be bought or sold. They can only be given freely, from one heart to another." That afternoon, I instructed my lawyers to establish the Alina Santos Memorial Scholarship Fund with an initial endowment of $50 million. The fund would provide full scholarships to deserving students from immigrant families who wanted to pursue careers in medicine, with a preference for those interested in pediatric oncology. But establishing the scholarship was just the beginning. As I became more involved in the selection process, meeting with applicants and learning their stories, I discovered something remarkable. Helping others gave me a sense of purpose and fulfillment that no business deal had ever provided. I began to spend more time on philanthropic activities and less time on corporate acquisitions. I started visiting the free clinics where Alina had volunteered, meeting with young doctors who were carrying on her mission of helping underserved communities. Through this work, I met Dr. Sarah Chen, a young pediatric oncologist who had known Alina during their time at Columbia. Sarah told me stories about Alina's compassion, her dedication to her patients, and her unwavering belief that every child deserved the best possible care, regardless of their family's ability to pay. Alina had this way of making everyone around her want to be better, Sarah told me. She believed that healing wasn't just about medicine. It was about love, hope, and human connection. As I listened to Sarah and others who had known Alina, I began to understand that Maria's gift had done more than just awaken my emotions. It had connected me to a legacy of love and service that would outlive all of us. 6 months after that Christmas day, I made a decision that shocked everyone who knew me. I stepped down as CEO of Blackwood Industries to focus full-time on philanthropy. I retained enough stock to maintain a comfortable lifestyle, but I donated the majority of my wealth to causes that would have mattered to Alina. The business world was stunned. Financial magazines ran articles questioning my sanity. Former colleagues called to ask if I was having a breakdown, but I had never been more certain of anything in my life. For the first time in decades, I was truly alive. 1 year after Maria's Christmas gift changed my life, I found myself standing in the auditorium of Columbia University's medical school, preparing to give the keynote address at the graduation ceremony. Among the graduates were 3 young doctors whose education had been funded by the Elena Santos Memorial Scholarship Fund, and I was there to celebrate not just their achievement, but the continuation of a legacy that had begun with a young woman I had never met but who had profoundly changed my life. The transformation in my life over the past year had been nothing short of miraculous. The cold, isolated billionaire who had laughed at a maid's gift had evolved into someone I barely recognized, a man who found joy in helping others, who measured success not in dollars but in lives changed, who had learned that the greatest wealth was the wealth of human connection. The Elena Santos Memorial Scholarship Fund had grown beyond my wildest expectations. What had started as a $50 million endowment had attracted additional donors who were inspired by Elena's story and the fund's mission. We now provided full scholarships to over 100 students annually, and our graduates were making a difference in communities across the country. But the scholarship fund was just one part of what had become a comprehensive network of programs designed to honor Elena's memory and continue her mission of healing. We had established free clinics in underserved communities, funded research into pediatric cancer treatments, and created mentorship programs that connected established doctors with students from immigrant families. Maria had become my partner in all of these endeavors. I had promoted her from maid to director of community outreach for the Elena Santos Foundation, a role that utilized her natural empathy and her deep understanding of the challenges faced by immigrant families. She had proven to be a natural leader, inspiring volunteers and connecting with beneficiaries in ways that my business background had never prepared me for. "Mr. Blackwood," Maria had said when I first offered her the position, "I don't know anything about running a foundation." "Maria," I had replied, "you know the most important thing. You know how to love people. Everything else we can learn." And learn we did. Together, we traveled to communities across the country, visiting the clinics we funded, meeting with scholarship recipients, and listening to the stories of families who had been helped by our programs. Each story reinforced the lesson that Maria had taught me with her Christmas gift, that the most powerful force in the world is love, freely given. One of the most meaningful relationships I had developed was with Dr. Carlos Mendoza, one of our first scholarship recipients. Carlos had grown up in a family of migrant farm workers and had seemed destined for a life of poverty until the Elena Santos Scholarship gave him the opportunity to pursue his dream of becoming a doctor. "Mr. Blackwood," Carlos had told me during one of our meetings, "you saved my life. But more than that, you gave me the chance to save other lives." Carlos was now completing his residency in pediatric oncology at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, working with young cancer patients and their families. He often sent me updates about his work, sharing stories of children he was helping and families he was supporting through their darkest hours. Every time I walk into a patient's room, Carlos had written in his most recent letter, "I think about Elena Santos and the legacy she left behind. I think about how one person's compassion can ripple out and touch hundreds of lives." As I stood at the podium that graduation day, looking out at the sea of young faces in caps and gowns, I thought about the ripple effect that Maria's gift had created. Her simple act of giving me Elena's photograph had not only transformed my life but had created a network of healing that was spreading across the country. "Graduates," I began my speech, "you are here today because you have dedicated years of your life to learning how to heal the human body. But I want to talk to you about a different kind of healing, the healing of the human heart." I told them Elena's story, about a young woman who had dreamed of becoming a doctor to help children with cancer, whose life had been cut short just months before she would have achieved that dream. I told them about Maria, a grieving mother who had found the strength to reach out to a stranger with love and compassion. Elena Santos never got the chance to practice medicine, I continued, but through her mother's gift of love, she has healed more hearts and saved more lives than she ever could have imagined. Because love, like medicine, has the power to heal, and like medicine, it works best when it's shared freely with those who need it most. I spoke about the responsibility that came with their medical degrees, not just to treat diseases but to see the humanity in every patient, to offer hope to the hopeless, and to remember that healing was as much about compassion as it was about clinical skill. After the ceremony, I was approached by Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the Dean of the medical school, who had become a close friend and advisor to the foundation. "Alexander," she said, "that was a beautiful speech. Alina would have been proud." "I hope so," I replied. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just trying to live up to the example she set, even though I never met her." "You know," Dr. Walsh said thoughtfully, "I think that's exactly what Alina would have wanted. She believed that we're all connected, that every act of kindness creates a chain reaction that can change the world." That evening, Maria and I attended a small celebration dinner with the 3 scholarship recipients who had graduated that day. As I listened to them talk about their plans, one was going to work in a free clinic in rural Mississippi, another was joining a research team focused on childhood leukemia, and the third was planning to open a practice in his hometown to serve the Latino community. I felt a profound sense of fulfillment that no business success had ever provided. "Maria," I said, as we drove back to Manhattan that night, "do you think Alina would approve of what we've built?" Maria was quiet for a moment, then she smiled. "I think Alina is dancing in heaven every time one of our doctors saves a life, every time a family gets the help they need, every time someone chooses love over fear." "I never thanked you properly," I said, "for saving my life." "I didn't save your life, Mr. Blackwood," Maria replied. "Alina did. I just delivered her message." As we approached the city, I reflected on how dramatically my life had changed since that Christmas day when I had laughed at Maria's gift. The penthouse that had once felt like a cold museum now felt like a home, filled with photographs of the young people we were helping and letters from families whose lives had been touched. By our work, I had also made personal changes that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. I had reconnected with my estranged brother, whom I hadn't spoken to in 15 years. I had begun dating Dr. Sarah Chen, the pediatric oncologist who had known Alina, and for the first time in decades, I was in a relationship based on shared values rather than mutual benefit. Most importantly, I had learned to see the world through Alina's eyes, as a place where every person mattered, where every act of kindness had the potential to change a life, and where love was the most powerful force for healing. The Alina Santos Foundation had become my life's work, but it was also my life's joy. Every day brought new opportunities to make a difference, new stories of hope and healing, new reminders of the lesson that Maria had taught me with her simple Christmas gift. 6 months later, on the anniversary of Elena's death, Maria and I visited her grave for the first time together. The headstone was simple but beautiful, engraved with the words, "Alina Santos, MD. She healed hearts before she could heal bodies." As we stood there in the quiet cemetery, I placed a photograph next to Elena's headstone. It was a picture of our most recent group of scholarship recipients, 25 young doctors who were carrying on Elena's mission of healing and hope. "Alina," I said softly, "your mother's gift saved my life and gave me a purpose I never knew I needed. Through you, I learned that the greatest wealth isn't what we accumulate, but what we give away. Thank you for teaching me how to live." Maria placed her hand on my shoulder, and together we stood in comfortable silence. To people whose lives had been forever changed by the power of love, to heal even the most broken hearts. As we walked away from the cemetery that day, I carried with me the knowledge that Elena's legacy would continue long after Maria and I were gone. The young doctors we were training would train others. The clinics we were building would serve communities for generations. And the love that had started with a grieving mother's Christmas gift would continue to ripple outward, healing hearts and changing lives in ways we could never fully measure. The millionaire who had once laughed at a maid's gift had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that true wealth comes not from what we possess, but from what we give, and that the greatest gifts are often wrapped in the simplest packages, delivered by the most unexpected messengers, and received by hearts that are finally ready to be healed. The end. Legal notice. This story is completely fictional and was created for entertainment purposes. Any resemblance to real persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental.